In 2020, the federal government introduced the Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement, ICHRA, a new way for employers to provide health benefits. Instead of sponsoring traditional group health plans, companies reimburse workers for individual insurance premiums on a pre-tax basis. Fast forward to today, adoption is growing. Question: is ICHRA the future of employer-sponsored health benefits, or is it a retreat, a shifting of risk from companies onto employees? The debate begins now. Welcome. We are really excited to bring 4 panelists to you today to talk about the new hot topic in employee benefits, and that is ICHRA. So here with me today, I've got 4 TPG employee benefit consultants with decades of experience. I think together we added it up. Literally, we're well over 100 years of experience. And that's a lot. And things feel like they're changing really fast, and there's a lot of innovation happening. And so we wanted to get some very different perspectives. Everybody has a different point of view here about the future of ICHRAs. So with me, I've got Case Escher, Chad Kemmis, Jane Perlis, and Zach Fritz, and I am Sarah Friend, president of the Partners Group. Okay, we are modeling this after the McLaughlin Group. So issue 1, ICHRAs. The Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement. Supporters call it the future of employer-sponsored health insurance. It is predictable, flexible, and empowering employees with choice. Critics warn that it shifts risk and responsibility from the company to workers, undermining stability and loyalty. So here's my first question. Is ICHRA a breakthrough in benefit design or a Trojan horse that will leave employees worse off? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay, Case.
All right. I believe that ICHRA it's a breakthrough. It's the greatest thing since I don't know what. I mean, you might if you think HDHPs are great, if you think FSAs are great, then so be it. But ICHRA is a unique vehicle that is going to allow employers to finally take control of healthcare costs. There are so many solutions out there that are chasing employers right now, and they're making promises. The truth is, a few claimants drive a majority of costs for any healthcare, any employer, any health plan. In that environment, there's very little an employer can do to control that, in spite of what promises are made by point solution vendors. ICHRA has the unique ability to help and let an employer define their cost, set it, and manage the risk by transferring it to the individual market.
Okay, all right, sounds easy.
Case, I would say you're essentially all you're doing is cost shifting directly onto employees by sending them to the individual market. You're giving them no protection. They're going to be in individual plans that have potentially narrow networks, much higher deductibles, a lot less choice, because in certain states, there aren't a lot of choices. And so you're essentially really downgrading what an employee has access to in an ICHRA model.
So Jane, what are we doing today for the fully insured employer that's looking at a 20-25% increase this year and is saying we can't absorb that as a company, so we have to cost shift to our employees anyways. We're going to raise contributions, we're going to raise deductibles, we're going to raise out-of-pocket maxes. To Case's point, again, that affects everybody based on a small number of claimants driving that cost. So I hear you, but I just think a lot of companies are running out of alternatives.
I'm hearing you both talk about the employer. I mean, and I get it. From the employer's vantage point, this is a good way to maybe control costs and get things kind of reined in, because obviously healthcare costs are out of control. But sending employees off into the individual market and go figure it out, when oftentimes they struggle making a decision between the 2 plans they have an option of right now. I'm concerned about the backlash that would cause from employees. And then if there's an employer out there that is have a quality plan or whatever, are they going to be able to retain that employee? I mean, I think there's going to be downstream impacts from this defined contribution model and sending employees off into this vast marketplace where it's hard enough as is.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Well, Case, I would ask you, what is going to happen when the rates go up in the individual market?
All right.
Then there's going to be pressure on employers to increase that ICHRA contribution. So yeah, it sounds great right now. Wait till those rates go up on the individual plan.
And this is what we talked about with HSAs 20 plus years ago. They were going to change healthcare. And now we're talking about them actually hurting healthcare.
And that didn't work for various reasons. Maybe we'll do another segment on that another time. But to your point, Jane, yes. And if you look at the individual market right now, the off exchange market, it is probably as bad as it's going to get. Because when you think about who is actually selecting individual plans right now, it's people who, if it's individuals who are with companies who have gone ICHRA already. The reason they've gone to an ICHRA strategy is because they have no other choice. Now, the entire company is in horrible risk. There's a few probably claimants in that pool that are bad risk. And then all the rest of the employees are probably halfway decent risk. But the individual market is probably as bad as it's going to get this cycle. As soon as employers start to see the benefits of ICHRA and migrate that way, the individual market is actually going to improve. And I believe it's going to outperform the group market.
Okay, I want to step in because I think Zach and Jane brought up a really good point that you guys haven't talked about yet, and that is the employee impact. So realistically, do you believe that employees will be able to navigate the complexity of choosing among, 15, 20 different options, and how will they do that without their HR's support?
Well, I'm not going to dispute Jane's point around the narrow networks, and the plan designs themselves are not what they are in the group market today. So that, I think we need to wait and see how that continues to evolve. My comment to that, Sarah, would be today employees are being given a couple different choices and being left to their own devices. So yes, you're increasing the amount of options and in theory the amount of equity that any employee can have for themselves and their family. They also will have a dedicated resource from the ICHRA vendor, and most of them are setting up either individual consultants, agents, or they're using AI platforms to help people make those decisions. And I would argue be even more thoughtful than they are today.
Yeah.
I think
What about the AI tools, Zach? Yeah. So, I feel like we do have more options that support employee choice and enrollment more than ever. Yeah. So.
No, I think I think it's a good point, and AI definitely makes this maybe a bit more palatable. I still think it's not like buying a vacuum cleaner on Amazon. I think that it's very personal. It's very complicated. It's their money. It's their health. It's their doctor. There's a lot of factors involved that an AI platform may just not be able to solve for them. I also just think with the workforce being so all over the country now, you can't just say, well, in Oregon it's this, or in California it's that, or in Georgia it's this. It's going to be, how are we going to make sure we're taking care of everyone? And I think that's a little bit trickier in a DC model.
You're going to have a very fragmented benefit strategy.
Yeah, but today you're saying, here are your 3 plans for employees in 35 different states.
Typically with a network that is going to be adequate for everyone, with a cost structure that is known for everyone that you've established.
That's been fully curated as part of an overall benefit strategy in conjunction with your broker. And Zach had a great point earlier, which is that in terms of employers who are trying to recruit and retain top talent, I think this is going to be a genuine issue if this is the solution. I think they're going to struggle. So I don't necessarily see the ICHRA market, all this great risk flooding the individual market, because certain employers will adopt it, others will not. And so that's not going to improve the individual risk pool anytime soon.
Okay, so moving on to our next issue. Will ICHRA's case empower employees with choice or overwhelm them with too much responsibility?
To Zach's point and Chad's point on the last question, it all depends on how an employer rolls out the ICHRA construct. If an employer picks a vendor that can help the employee select the right plan, I think they'll have a better experience than what they have right now. Right now, there's these products like Jellyvision. There's these decision support tools that employers offer to employees to help them pick, do I pick the HDHP? Do I pick the ICHRA? Do I pick the PPO? Those tools ask questions. They're AI driven, and they recommend a plan. Employees buy property casualty insurance, homeowners auto insurance. They buy that. They talk to an individual agent who talks to them about their hopes and dreams, where they're at, and basically advises them accordingly. If you have the right ICHRA partner in rolling this out, you can have that experience for your employees. So I think it could be a better experience
for employees.
What do you think about that? I mean, in terms of giving employees more choice to own their own decision making.
I think for some employees, though, that will be very attractive. I think for the bulk of employees, that may be terrifying. And so I think that's part of the challenge. And I think in the seat of human resources supporting your employees, I'm just thinking about the HR person that now has to field the question about, hey, can you help me out with my plan selection? And now they're answering the question, I got shown 23 options. The AI tool told me this. I don't know, it doesn't feel right. What should I do? And I just think doing that over and over and over again is going to be very tricky and very challenging and puts a different type of pressure on human resources and their internal support. And frankly, it makes it really uncomfortable in some ways, I think in a situation like that too. So I think choice is good, but, I think about what we did with 401ks and when we used to offer 40, 50 different plans. And I think the employees were like, I can't even figure this out. And guess what? 80% of people just take the plan that's going to be indexed to their retirement age and they call it a day. And that's not even their health. I mean, that's their money. It's a big deal, but it's, so I think there's some pros and cons there.
So I think a question I go to now is like, what is human resources objective function in an organization? And I think it has morphed so significantly to taking care of the employee health plan. And I don't know that HR leaders need to be spending all their time focusing on that. I mean, I understand the landscape has shifted where employer-sponsored care is such a dynamic part of employment, but I think there's an argument that could be made that an HR leader in an organization can focus on the overall employee and cultural engagement of a company, not an individual's health plan that should be a personal decision between themselves and their family with a trusted representative that you can put them in front of. So I think this actually could free up HR to focus on bigger picture company goals rather than handhold individuals in their health claims.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jane, about freeing up HR leaders to focus on something else?
It's possible. Although I don't necessarily agree that I think ICHRAs there is gonna be some administrative burden that still exists, and potentially even more complicated. Depending on the TPA that you hire to help with the ICHRAs and their ability to do that successfully. So yes, I think I don't disagree. I'm just not sure that it's going to be burden free.
Yeah, and I would add, I think that's a very hopeful position to take. And the reality is when you're in the trenches and your employees are coming to you, so maybe would the solution be, hey, I need to spend my time on more strategic items. So do you have to hire somebody to deal with all those questions, or do you start saying no? I mean, and then it goes back, I know, to what kind of support you're getting from the ICHRA vendor or the broker and all that. But I still think there's an inevitability about people coming to HR. I think it's almost impossible to avoid.
There is. And
Okay, we got to move on. I know you're about ready to say something so good.
it was going to be very good.
Leave it for the comments. Okay. Next issue. How should executives weigh the risk of employee dissatisfaction against the benefit of financial predictability?
Well, okay. I identify most with the CFO of the organization. My background is data, it's finance. I think more like a CFO than I do an HR leader. So with that, that's probably why
You're colored.
We'll keep that.
I have a bias.
Yeah, we'll disclaim
right?
that.
And so I'll just say this: unless you are in the business of managing health, like a health system is, you exist to do something other than offer a health plan. You exist to do something than deliver medical care to your employees. And as Chad said in a previous question, what is the core function of HR in an organization, right? There's so much time and effort spent on managing this fringe benefit that has taken over the number 3 slot in the P&L for most organizations. What is their core competence? If you're Amazon or Intel, or if you're Ford or Chevrolet, right? You're all about basically building your product and selling your product. Healthcare is you have to offer it, right? But imagine being able to focus your effort and energy on your core business function. So being able to then take this liability that is healthcare, being able to define it, to finally manage it and control it through an ICHRA model allows you to focus as an organization on improving your core processes and your core products, your core services, which part of that could be the employee value proposition.
Well, remember, you need people to deliver on those products. So, Zach, what do you think?
I don't think there's any doubt. And by the way, Case, I have a finance degree too, so. So I can appreciate the seat of a CFO loving this, right? Like fixing costs, having it known, not having to think about what's my increase going to be. I totally agree with all of that. I just think to what Sarah's point is, it's a great lead in. I think that all works if it all works, right? And so I think that's the question, and that's why we're having this conversation, right? I mean, it's not a simple solution that just all of a sudden works. And so I think that it can be a great method to control costs and kind of allow the business to focus on what they do best, as long as it doesn't have a downstream impact on employees that either A, mean that they're, struggling and maybe looking for other jobs, or B, basically not happy with their own job because of what the health plan now looks like for them. And then how does that create culture? And then how does that impact your ability to perform what you do best, which is the core business? So I think, again, I agree. It can work brilliantly if it all works. And I think that's the devil in the details discussion we're having.
But it's not hypothetical. ICHRA's been around for 5 years, at least, or maybe 5 years. 2020 is when it first came into being. And many a group has gone and taken the strategy. Some stories are great, some are not so great. And so learning from that is one thing, but I just want to say that not everything we're talking about is pure hypothetical and theoretical. And we have the ability to go and find and talk to organizations that have done this.
But I just think that there's an opportunity, again, to rethink how benefits are provided to employees at organizations. We know the vast majority of employees are paying into the benefits plan each and every paycheck, and yet they're extracting little value out of the actual benefits themselves, unless something more catastrophic happens, at which case they have a deductible and they have out-of-pocket. So it's like, what do you really have there? I would argue, I think for a lot of people, they would prefer to have a lower cost, catastrophic type exposure, but then actually bring in some benefits that they can use on a more regular basis. So maybe that is virtual direct primary care or voluntary benefits where if something happens, they have this extra coverage, that you can provide a more equitable program to more people. I think it's just a different way to approach this, because I do not think the current system, and we're seeing this in the renewal season right now, the fully insured employers are looking at 10, 15, 20, 25% increases. I think regardless, an organization can't continue to absorb that. And so then we're risking, all right, we have to lay off people because we can't keep growing at this rate that our healthcare costs are going up. So yeah, I do think this is a bit of a drastic measure right now, but I think as more employers start going this route, it will be more appetizing for companies to say, look, they're all doing it as well, and this is the new normal going forward.
Jane,
Well, I think we'll have some employees who love it and some who cannot stand it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's...
What do you think about his point about the different demographics within an employee population, and that how choice might help bring more employee satisfaction for a 25-year-old who's looking for something in their health plan very different than a 51-year-old?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely. I do worry about the ability for certain employees, creating an equity issue in terms of employee sophistication and their ability to pick an appropriate plan.
Well, in different states too.
In different states for their own personal health issues or their dependents' health issues. We had a conversation earlier about defined, pension plans and defined contribution plans in the retirement world, and how many Americans are not set up appropriately for retirement in this new and now fully adopted defined contribution world. I worry that the same thing will happen in the healthcare market, where we're just going to have people not picking a good plan for their healthcare needs. Maybe they pick a catastrophic plan that's not appropriate for them, and something happens, and then they find themselves unprepared financially.
Okay. let's move on to another issue. Let's talk about how an ICHRA potentially positions an employer. So do you think an ICHRA strategy, moving from a traditional group plan to an ICHRA, positions an employer as innovative and agile or as shifting costs onto employees? Zach?
Yeah. Wow. I think it's in the eye of the beholder. I think it goes back a lot to what you were both talking about with this. The individual market's different in that it's, as most know, it's age rated, right? And so you have to really then craft the ICHRA appropriately to have a similar experience for everyone, right? I think the employee that's 25 can go get a $300 plan. The employee that's 55 might see that same plan for $900. So how you structure your contribution to the ICHRA massively affects the experience, which really then answers the question. So I think if done right, I think it can be perceived as innovative and a good way to do it. But then I think if not done really, really well, it could really backfire. And that would be concerning to me if I were in the employer's shoes, if it wasn't set up correctly. And I think that's where you hear the stories about it not working.
So how do you, Case and Chad, as brokers, how do you make sure that you were helping an employer set it up the right way?
I would say, with us and our team being involved, they already have the upper hand, right? I think there's a lot of different vendors that are in this space right now because they see the opportunity going forward. So we are in the midst of trying to determine who are our partners in this space, who are the most reputable firms that will help, to our point earlier, take employees, thoughtfully walk them through, have a level of customer service, integration with the carriers, all of that. So I don't disagree. And I think it is short-sighted to say that this is totally something that all employers should be looking at right now. I think this is a nuanced conversation primarily for employers who are running out of options financially. But my point earlier is that as more employers adopt this, as the individual market improves, as vendors rise to the top, that in itself will create a better experience. And I think a bit of a snowball where more and more employers will go this route and more employees will start to see it as the norm. And I think people will quickly forget today's world and just look at it as, now I have a choice and this is my new process.
Case, what do you think?
Well,
is this the choice of last resort for frustrated employers, or is this more broadly?
It has been, and that's it's got a stigma to it, right? It has been, but I think Zach's spot on that it's in the eye of the beholder. But I would ask any of you, what were HDHPs like when they rolled out? In fact, just about every group I look at that offers an HDHP alongside another plan, guess who picks the HDHP? It's the lower wage workers who want the lower payroll deduction, who probably can't afford that first dollar coverage, even with the employee contribution. So everything that you're saying, Jane, has been going on in the group market for as long as I've been in the industry, number one. Number two, defined benefit pensions, those were unfunded liabilities. Many a company either cut them out. In fact, the great financial crisis, if you looked at what happened there, the automakers, they, except for the union groups, what the government made them, the non-union groups took a massive haircut to their pension. So it wasn't guaranteed. 401k, your money, right? And so is it as rich? Maybe not, but it transfers the risk and the reward to the employee versus leaving it on the employer. And if the employer goes out of business, guess what happens to your pension? There's some guarantee that happens at the government level, but it's not near the great thing that it sounds like it is.
Well, and I was just saying, you touched on something so important, which is education. So if you roll out a high deductible health plan, the first thing you want to do is educate those employees. Don't pick this if you can't afford this deductible, And so I think it's kind of the same thing with the ICHRA. It's how do we adequately educate and arm employees with the proper information to make appropriate choices for their financial and health care circumstances.
I think you also said another word, union, which I think will make things quite interesting when we think about, how this goes, really snowballs, right? Because there's going to be some resistance and some challenges when you get into those types of plans, public entity space. That's a whole different animal.
It is, and your average public entity public entity doesn't have the same margin constraints and margin pressures that your average either nonprofit or for-profit entity has. So I agree with you, Mark. And then not everybody's going to do all this all at once, but and to your question, is it innovative? It's going to be disruptive. Everything that's happened, in this market, in the Oregon market, we went from an HMO market in the mid 2000s to PPO. That happened very quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And there are
Yes.
structural things that cause that. Like you need physician leadership. You need the providers to take an active role in an HMO type environment. But that happened quickly and it was disruptive. People didn't know how to use the PPO at first because they used the HMO. So I think all of that is choppy water that's going to happen with the ICHRA or any new strategy.
I do think, history tells us change happens very, very slowly and then all at once. And so this whole idea about ICHRAs being so far a relatively low take-up rate, especially in the West, are we coming to a tipping point where we are going to see it snowball? We are going to see more employers than simply the ones who are out of options looking at ICHRAs seriously. And do the ICHRA administrators, with the help of AI, can they accelerate making the employee experience that much sooner? So here's my closing round. My question is, given all that slow, and change then happens all at once, I want your predictions. So in 5 years, we'll go around the table. What percentage of employers do you believe will offer ICHRA as their primary benefit strategy? Who wants to start?
Why are y'all looking at me?
You always have a lot to say.
And
I'll go first. I think it will continue to grow exponentially in the next few years and then level off. So I would say in the total healthcare employer-sponsored space, maybe 30% have ICHRA as their primary strategy.
In 5 years.
In 5 years, but I also think a lot of large employers will roll out ICHRA for part-time employees or variable hour employees.
That's a good
And so there will be
point.
fringe ICHRA uses, but primary strategy, probably not more than a majority of employers.
Okay, 30%. You think that's too high or too low?
I think that I was going to say around 2025. I think it's also going to be group size dependent. I think there's going to be a movement towards ICHRAs in the smaller group space. And so I could see that market being upwards of 40, 50. I think large group, getting up to 20 might be a stretch.
Jane, what do you think?
I agree with Zach. I think I definitely see an uptick in certain size groups in certain states in particular. But I think it'll be a longer road potentially for larger employers. That being said, I think y'all brought up some very good points.
Okay, Case, you get the final word. Oh my gosh, how did that work out?
I think it depends on how many people watch this forum in the next 5 years, because we discussed some pretty weighty things here. I agree with Chad. I think it's going to be more like 30% overall in the next 5 years. I think within 10 years, it'll be 50%. Is how I see it.
So you don't see it plateauing quite the same way.
I see it growing in the same way Chad did. It's because in the last year, it's gone like this. So I think it's going to continue to.
Mainly in other parts of the country, though. I do feel like that employers here in the Pacific Northwest may not see the take-up rate increasing because most people are talking about it theoretically here, but in other parts of the country, they're doing it.
Completely agree with you. Yeah, and healthcare. Let's face it, healthcare is regional, right? Which is what makes even the group market kind of challenging. Got employees in Hawaii. Yeah. What do you do for that, right? It's like, you're kind of in a bind because of the state regulations there and the product. So everything we discussed as far as the constraints of ICHRA, I mean, they kind of exist in some way or form in the group plan, just not as severe. But to your point, there's going to be an inflection point, right? And then the question is when. And I don't know when that is. If it looks like it did for 401k and defined benefit, defined benefit came around, or 401k came around in the 80s, and that wasn't really until the 90s when the critical mass happened, and employers started seeing what was going on there. So, but I do think it's going to grow in popularity, and my biggest case for that is trend.
Okay. Well, we have this recorded. Everyone's predictions are now on film and on record. And so we will make sure to come back in 5 years and see who was right. But thank you all for being a part of a conversation and debating. I love working with really, really smart people who aren't afraid to disagree with each other, because this is a really important topic for employers to really understand all sides of it. It's a pretty significant change. And so hearing both sides is really an important and crucial part of the conversation. So thank you all.